Recording. I guess what we wanted to know first of all is when you were born and where you were born.
Well, I was born October 31st, 1918, a mile north here, where my brother lived. And grandfather lived there. And I was delivered by old Doc Johnson in Warrensburg. He came out on the night of the 29th, stayed all night. Well, the next morning, Ma wasn't ready. So he went back to his office, come back the night of the 30th, stayed all night. About 1 o'clock I was born. And I was delivered out here in the country. The next morning there was about 6 inches of snow on the ground. So it was coming a cold time. So then, of course, they named me Elmer Allen Bell. My Aunt Irby Allen named me. And then that was during the Battle of the Argonne Forest. My dad was over there in Germany. And they got notice that Dad was missing in action. Well, what really happened in the missing of action was that they was advancing in the Argonne Forest, and him and his buddy, they jumped in a shell hole. Well, he was with the Nebraska National Guard, and Bully, he decided he wanted this mile. You guys get another place. Well, Dad's buddy, he argued with him. It was a nice warm day, and that was in December. So he picked up an overcoat and went and jumped another hole. Well, they hadn't no more than got the other shell hole. A direct hit on that hole, nothing left. Well, the boys coming around cleaning up and picking up the dead and so forth. There was an overcoat, Dad's serial number in it. So they picked it up, thought maybe he was missing completely, you know. So anyway, the government notified grandparents that Dad is missing in action. So Granddad said, well, we're going to name him Junior. So they changed my name to Junior, but they never turned it into the state. So when I got ready to get my Social Security, I had a hell of a time. But I still had two neighbors, Earl Smar and Dory Teague. They knew when I was born, so that helped me out on getting my birth certificate. So anyway, Dad showed up on Mother's Day in 1919. He come into Warrensburg from the East Coast, got off the train. Somebody out here, I don't know who it was now, wanted to know, Elmer, you want to ride home? Yeah, hell yes, he jumped in. He didn't have time to call the grandparents. So when he got out there, Granddad, he jumped out and walked up, had the front door open, walked in the front door. Well, they about all fainted when he come in. And that was Mother's Day of 1919. So, you know, as time went on, I didn't want to accept him, but finally got used to him. And as time grew up, Dad was a nervous damn wreck. Every time it come an electrical storm, he walked the floor. And I said I was a nervous wreck myself. And I thought when I got older, if I ever have any kids of my own, I'm sure trying to hell not going to discourage them on something as lightning. Well, which I didn't. They stay out in the lightning now, which ain't too good. But anyway, that's what I did during that time. Well, then Aline come along, and they were still living with my grandparents. So in 1921, I believe it was. We moved down south, the next house, where James got. And I couldn't stand that. I'd run off, go back up to Grandma's. And see, I'd have been about 3 years old. And I got a good whipping on that. He whipped me with green onions. Now, you know that hurt, didn't it?
Every day?
No, just at one time. That broke me.
Oh, I thought you
Well,
said...
it wasn't hurting me at all. But it's hurting my mind.
I thought you said in the previous recording that you ran back up there every day.
Well, I went up every day, but they seemed to me I'd get back. Well, they finally paddled me. That's when I stayed at home with them onions. So, you know, I don't know what went on, man.
Well, you said that he didn't know you was born, but he knew they was looking for you whenever he was
knew that.
gone. But he didn't really find out for sure until he walked in the door.
He didn't know till he walked in the door, and I was there. Yeah, because no mail come through, no mail went out, or no one come through.
And how long was he in the hospital, and what exactly was his injury?
I don't know what his injuries was. I know he was hit up beside the head, cut him open up here beside the temple. If it had just been a little deeper, it had got him. That's all I remember. I don't know.
I think you said that maybe his arm was broke too, and he had shrapnel or something.
Well, it was shrapnel is what it was. Shrapnel was what hit him in the head. But I don't know how long it lasted or what he did. I don't know. But then when it did get going, you see the war was over, and they kind of used him on a work detail, what they had around there.
Well, whenever you did get back, or whenever he did get back, I believe before you was telling us that the neighborhood decided to run off the rattlesnake people so that they can move into James's house.
Well, see, he got back, and Dad grew up with the Bryants lived there, and Bill Bryant and Dad was good buddies, but Bill never did have to go to service. And but the girls, there was a bunch of girls, 2 of them married Catholics. And when they married Catholics, they didn't want them in this neighborhood, you know. So they wanted to get them out of the neighborhood. So Alec Darr and Bill Parker said if Granddad would buy part of it, well, Alec Darr said he'd buy the west 40. So Grandpa bought 80 acres of it. He already had bought 40 acres off the place before. So when they got that done, they moved out, and Dad moved in. That is 21, he moved in. Now my grandmother, her grandfather came here from Ireland, and he was a Protestant. And Ireland was Catholics, mostly. And they fought all the time, back and forth. Now my ancestors had grandmother so doctrinated, she thought more of a rattlesnake than she did a Catholic. So that's how come the things turned that way. So, but then the Bryant that Dad was buddied with, I didn't know till Emma Irvin come and moved with me. He told Emma, he died, and then Pine had the estate, and she didn't get what she was supposed to. The hospital got it. Emma, if you ever get in trouble, Elmer Bell will take care of you. Now you check on him. So she come out here and rented the house across the road here. And but I never thought about Bill Bryant telling her something like that.
Well, and okay, you said Eileen was born in 21. Is that what you said? March, maybe?
She was born in 20.
March
No, 21. March 8th and 21.
Okay, and then Benny came in
He was born
1924.
in April of 24.
Let's see. So let's see. I'm trying to figure out who. He was named after George Benjamin
And
and George Allen.
he was named after both grandpas.
George Allen and Benny Bell. That's who he was named.
Ben Bell, Benjamin Franklin Bell was my grandfather Bell. My grandfather Allen was George Allen. I don't know what his middle name was now. So they named him George Benjamin. That's what they named him. So he didn't go by that. They called him Benny, and he stayed as Benny all the time.
Do you recall who it was that brought your dad out here whenever he got back from the East Coast? You may have said, and
From what?
whenever he got back to Warrensburg, and who was it that gave him a ride out to the house?
Well, I didn't never know. I might have known at one time, but I don't remember.
Okay, well, I don't know which direction to go first, but maybe we should split off. And I know that there was a lot of relatives on both sides that come from down around Windsor, north of Windsor, and so I guess maybe if you just start in and maybe trace back the Bells or trace back the Allens or whatever, start in and we'll go from there.
Well, I don't know. You see, the Bell side of my family, my grandfather was born 3 miles east of Windsor. His dad died with typhoid fever. He's 2 years old. His uncle, Squire Phillips, northwest of Windsor, raised him. Well, when he got old, he went back older. He around to working. He moved back home with his mother. Well, he got a job east of Windsor, named Llewellyn. And the man had a son that married a Greer girl, which raised over here right east of Oak Grove Church. And that is Alexander Greer. Well, Alexander Greer had 15 kids. Every time a kid got married, he gave him a farm. So she got a farm while he was working there. Well, they didn't want to move from Windsor up here, so she rented it to my granddad. And he come up here in August and plowed his wheat ground. July and plowed his wheat ground. And the horses got hot, 3 horses on a 16-inch walking plow. And he took his shears off, took them to the blacksmith shop. Well, put them back on, they still got hot. He went up to Johnny Greer's and he said, "There's something the matter with my plow." He said, "There ain't a thing the matter with your plow. You're in a different country than you was at Windsor." He said, "You give them a time and they'll make it." He said, "At Windsor, 2 horses would pull a 16-inch plow better than 3 did up here." That's how easy it was plowing. So that's how come us to be up here. Then in 1901, we had a drought and they burned up no crop. And he hired out to Johnny Greer for a year. He had 3 horses. Johnny boarded them for the work. And then in August of 2002, he moved over here where Benny lived. But then in 1901, they'd come to Oak Grove Church and Grandma bringing lunch, and then they'd drive up here where Rick Bracken is, and not Rick, but Eddie, and check their cows. They had cows on 120 acres there. And they come back next Sunday. There's one Sunday there's big fat calves on them, the next Sunday they come back is all dead. So he sold the cows and went to work for Johnny Greer. That's what happened there. Well, then later, Granddad come back over here, and the next year, started there, was going to build a house up there. But during the time, he bought some more ground and joined him, so he never did get up there. Panic come in 1908, and old man John Roach had sold him this farm. He was scared of his money in his bank, so Granddad, he wasn't scared of the money in his bank, which wasn't a good idea, but he's lucked out, and he sold the ground back to old man Roach. But then he added on another 40 from Bryant's, which I was telling you a while ago, which gave him 120 acres over here. So he never did get up there at that place. So then my grandmother Belle, her grandfather came here from Ireland and built his house in the very northwest corner of Benton County. He had 60 acres there. Made his own brick and built his house. Well, then my grandmother's mother lived just east of it, which she was a daughter of Will Bell. Now, Will Bell was a first cousin to my great-grandfather Bell, Robert Bell. So that made my grandmother and granddad third cousin. So, so that's the way they was.
When you're talking about the one where he made the bricks, is that the one where we went to and
Yeah.
where the house is?
Yeah.
When we first started taping the last time, that you said the house was standing, but when we went down there, that it
Done fell.
yeah.
It rotted off because of the roof. And the foundation wasn't nothing but little flat rock, laid limestone rock, laid about an inch thick all they was, and laid up in a good solid foundation. And that house stood there till, well, what was it? It'd have been about the turn of the century. It was built back in about 1830.
And you said that, did you say that there was a creek back there where they got their clay from, or their water for their, when they were making the bricks, or what was
No, I never knew. I guess they got the break there, but I don't know what it really was, but it had sand in it. You know, the brick had sand in it, but they was good brick.
and those are the bricks, didn't we bring back a couple bricks from there?
Yeah,
I don't even remember where they're at now.
well, I don't know, y'all got them. I don't know what happened to them.
Well, I like to think that, I'm sure she didn't get rid of it, but.
Well, anyway, that's what it was.
When we were there, you were talking about that maybe after you and Grandma got married that you stayed there for a while or visited or.
We went down there. Grandma had a sister and a brother, and her sister ended up with the old home place. She married a wire, and the wire was from up here at this country, Jake Wire. Well, her brother, he was a coal miner, and he had 2 daughters, and we stayed with one of the daughters fall that Edith and I got married overnight one night and visited with them. And then the next morning we picked up Jake Wire and went out to see a cousin, Virgil Bell, which Virgil Bell's mother was a sister to Jake Wire. And she's got a daughter today, which is Nita Ray Clubb.
Which is the one we went and visited
Yeah.
last year?
Yeah. So that's what happened in there. But Ed Nelson, that is my grandmother's brother, he mined coal till he couldn't mine coal. He was a great supporter of John L. Lewis, organized the coal workers. Jake Wire was a coal hauler, and they argued all the time. That coal haulers, they didn't need any more money, and he said they did. Well, that's what made me such a NFO member, because I seen what my great uncle, I thought more of him than the other, that I fell for unions, and I support union yet.
Well, I'm just kind of made notes as I went along when I was playing back the previous tape, and this is talking about where your great grandfathers came from, and then one from Ireland that was in the northwest corner of Benton County. And then it starts talking, it jumps over into Jake Fickus and John Fickus. So maybe, was that a good place to take off with
Did
it?
I jump to that? Well, I left the Bells there, went over to mother's side. But on my grandfather's side, I can add to that, he had, let's see, he had 4 brothers, I believe. One lived in Windsor. He was run a dray wagon in Windsor's, all he ever done. The oldest boy was John Bell. He had 1 boy, and he died in 26. Rock fell on him in the coal mine, Windsor. But John Bell was just an old drunk, and Grandma never got along with him at all. And then, but the other she did. So that's about what happened to the Bell family. And then you say I jumped over to the Fickuses.
Well, yeah, well, that's where it's at. But let me just ask this. Besides Juanita and that end of it, and then you and your sons and grand, besides Juanita and her kids and grandkids, and you and your kids and grandkids, what other branches of Bells are there still out there? Is there quite a few?
No, not carrying the name, eh? I had, Granddad just had 1 son. That takes care of Aline, Benny, and I. Well, then Oscar Bell had 2 girls and a boy. And the girls married Samples, and I don't know what the other 2 girls married. There's 3 girls with it. And the boy was Cecil Bell. He was a brakeman on the railroad, and he breaking a railroad car out here at Orangeburg and fell off the car and cut his leg off. Well, he didn't live too many years after that. So that's what happened to them, but there ain't much left of that family. There ain't no relatives left. So, but Nita Ray, that's Virgil Bell. That's my grandfather's brother, just older than him. Bruce Bell was his name, and that's who Anita Club is from. That's her sister. Then we come on over with Benny and Eileen. And Eileen, she married Wesley Nichols and had 2 girls, went from there. Benny married Juanita, and they had a boy and a girl, you see.
Oh, what year was it when Benny died?
In 86.
And what kind of cancer was it that he had?
Well, I know he had prostate trouble, but I don't know what else.
And Eileen, she died, what year did she die?
Can't tell you that. I think it was, did she die ahead of Edith?
Boy, I'm not sure.
It was after, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Eileen was 81 when she died.
So that was just a year after. Didn't she have a thing up there at John Knox Village for her 80th birthday?
80th birthday.
So it was just a year later when she died?
And a year later she died.
Huh.
That had been 2002.
Okay. So that's when she went, so I guess we can...
Huh?
I guess if that's about all of your thoughts on the Bells, we could go ahead and switch over and to the other side. And I'm not sure, I can't remember why there was a jump from Bells to Fickuses, but is that a good place to jump to now?
As far as I know, that's about where the Bells ended up at. But then Fickuses, they came in on my grandmother Allen's side. Now my grandmother Allen, she was a Stewart, but her mother was a Ficus. And her grandfather was Jake Ficus, which would be my great-great-grandfather. And Jake Ficus's father was John Adam Ficus, which he was 102 when he died. And he had, I don't know, a whole bunch of kids. And he came here in 1835, south of Warrensburg. First rode north of Y and go east.
That was John?
John Campbell.
And that's...
John Adam Ficus.
And I take it Bowman's store was around there?
Bowman's store was the end of the road where you turn off to go down to his house. Now down at his house, he built a church on his property and a graveyard on it. The graveyard's still there, but the church is long gone. Now he was a German Baptist, and his relation came from Germany in 1710, on when Martin Luther was starting up, and big battle between them. So they come here and fought in the Revolutionary War. And then, I don't know how far he would have been from his ancestors, but he decided to leave Pennsylvania and go to Virginia. Stayed in Virginia, I think, 3 years, and then he went to Kentucky. And he's the first man to ever go over the mountains in Kentucky with a wagon and team. The settlers was on the west side of Kentucky. They came up the Mississippi River. So he got over there with a wagon, and salt was a necessity at that time. So he took them and crossed the ferry on the Ohio River into Indiana and got a load of salt in the haul back. Well, he stayed there 5 years it was, and then he moved to Indiana for 2 years. Then he moved from there to Falls, Missouri for 7 years, and then moved to Warrensburg. That's all the Ficuses, like their ancestors. Now my grandmother's father, he came here from Scotland, and he disappeared. He left.
What was his name?
Stewart, S-T-U-R-T.
Oh.
And they don't know where he disappeared to. Never seen anything to hide of him anymore, so I don't know what happened. And, but I don't know, but my grandfather Allen, they came here from England. And his granddad came here with his son was with him. His granddad had been married, but he wasn't married then. The two of them come here. So they was going to build a house north of Windsor, which is in the Owsley neighborhood. And they couldn't get no lumber, so they had to go to St. Louis to get lumber. So they went to St. Louis to get the lumber, and took a cow rig, both of them. And it'd be my great-great-grandfather died, but my great-grandfather survived. So he brought the lumber and come back and built a house north of Windsor. And but there was three brothers left England. One come to the United States, one went to Argentina, and one went to Australia. When they left England, they were going to try and see which country they thought was the best and get back together. But my grandfather died pretty quick after he got here, So that was the end of that. We never did know what happened to the others.
Huh. So there's still some branches that are either in Argentina or
Well, they
Australia
could
or
be
went
branches
back,
in Argentina or Australia, either one.
or they could have just packed up and moved back to England.
Huh?
They may have just packed up and moved back to
They
England.
might have went back to England for all we know. So, but they come here from England.
Well, I know it's talking about several different 5 generations, but before I switch over to that, while we're still on the ficus name, didn't Rhonda, whenever she said that whenever you guys went to the museum here in Warrensburg, that there wasn't there something there on display?
Well, the museum in there was John Adam Fickus. It had his gun, his knife that he skinned them out with, or stabbered, whatever you want to call it. He'd hammered it out of a blacksmith. It's pretty rough. And his powder horn is in a case in the museum. And that is presented to them by Marion Fickus. Now, Marion Fickus is the last Fickus living that I know of. And he's my age, and I don't know whether he's still living or not. But he was a school teacher and taught most of the time in Illinois. His dad walked and carried mail in Warrensburg for years. And then his uncle worked for Ennis Mills.
Well, what year was that?
I don't remember exactly what years it was. When he did die, I don't remember.
Well,
he was carrying mail yet in the early 40s.
was Ennis Mills there
Yeah,
before
they
you were
running.
born, or?
They was running. No, they was born before Ennis Mills comes in there, but they were raised out there south of Warrensburg, right on 13 Highway. Now, they had 3 sisters. One run the donut shop across from on West Gay Street, across from the Corner Cafe. And then the other 2, I don't know what they did do. But one of them lived in Montana, and her husband had a sheep ranch. And he had people working with him, helping take care. And he went berserk and killed all his hard hands in the 30s. So she came back to Missouri.
Left the sheep up there.
Left the sheep up there.
Well, one of the notes I've got here after John Fickus, it's grandmother Allen was 5 generations with, was that with Rhonda?
Grandmother Allen, when her first daughter was born, was 5 generations.
Okay.
See, that is Grandma's mother, grandfather, and great-grandfather, Jake Fickus. John Adam Fickus. He was still living when my grandmother's first child was born. 5 generations. Well, I like 4 years being 5 generations. My grandmother, great-grandmother was died no, it'd be my great-grandfather was in 1914. So we missed 4 years being 5 generations. Then when Gene came along, there was 5 generations in. Rhonda come along, there was 5 generations again. Now we're waiting for another 5.
Well, now, said something about Grandpa's mom saw 5 generations.
Huh?
It said something about Grandpa's mom saw 5 generations with Adam. So was Adam part of a 5 generation?
Yeah. He was 5 generations too.
With who all was in that?
Huh?
Who are all the people? I mean, it was Adam and Rhonda, Gene.
Well, you had Eugene was the first 5 generations after grandmother's first child. She never had no generation of mine, 5 generations. I just like 4 years of being. So then when my Gene come along, he had 5 generations. Rhonda come along, he had 5 generations. Adam come along, he had 5 generations.
And so, right now, I guess we're just waiting on Adam and Susan to
Well, we're waiting on somebody.
to have one, or maybe Mason and Mindy. I don't know, and see, this is where it would be an advantage to have Rhonda do this, because she knows more how all these people are tied together. But on the tape, this may be a completely different direction, but one of the next things on there was about John Will Coates.
John Will Coates goes back to the Bells. John Will Coates was a sister to my great-grandmother Bell. Brother and sister. And their parents was the ones that settled east of Windsor in 1820. Well, John Will Coates never got married. Civil War broke out. He was on the Confederate side. Now, the Coateses didn't have slaves, the Bells didn't either. But he took the South Side, secession, from the Union. And John Will Coates went through the Civil War. He was just 15 years old. And he was in the Battle of Lone Jack. And he got separated from his outfit. And just a young kid. And he had a revolver he had on each hip he wore. So he was trying to get south. He was out south around Pleasant Hill somewhere, and he was hungry. So he drove into a house, and there was Union soldiers everywhere just after him. And he asked the lady if she could have something to eat. She said, yes, but I ain't got anything left. You get something ready, I'll get you something ready. Now you stay on your horse till I got something ready. So he stayed on his horse till he got something ready. He tied the bridle reins to a little limb and stepped on the porch and was sitting at the table eating a revolver on each side. And he was eating and he looked up, and there they was looking in the windows and the doors, and he started shooting and jumped astraddle his horse. Well, he killed 3 of them. But when he got down the road, his saddle wasn't comfortable. And he checked and see what was the matter, and there was a hole through the back of it. So that's how close he got bullet. So then, as they had a reunion in 90, I believe it was in that area, and he went to it in Kentucky. And there was a woman got up and announced, is there anybody there by the name of
John Will Coates.
John Will Coates. And he got up to see what she wanted. So he went to talk to her. And she told him that what happened when he got away, they tied her mother to a chair and set the house on fire and watched her burn up. Said she hadn't forgot that day. So that's what happened to her.
And did he ever find out their names at all? That he doesn't know the names?
Huh?
Did he find out the names of those people?
No, he didn't say what the names, I never did hear what the names of the people were. But anyway, she was at the reunion. And he rode with Price. He was under Price's armor all the way through. Then my great-grandfather Nelson, my grandmother Bell's uncle, he was in the Confederate, and he was only 14 when he joined. But he went through, and he's also with Price. But he had a brother, John Nelson, and he rode with Quantrell. Well, the James brothers quit riding with Quantrell, and he went with the James brothers. And he was with the James brothers when they robbed a train at Otterville. They put him in the penitentiary. Well, he didn't get out of the penitentiary until I was a young boy. And he was just barely getting around, that's all.
And he died just a short time after that.
He died a short time after he got out.
Let's see. Was there something about Price or somebody wanting one of those guys' horse?
Huh?
It seemed like I heard that one of those commanders of some of these guys, either Nelson's or Coates, his horse got shot out from underneath him, and he decided he wanted his horse. Did I remember something like that, or am I dreaming that up?
But I don't remember that, what I did have. But I know Price started out with, his first crew was a bunch of young boys, 15 and 17, from Dunlop brothers from St. Joe. The 15-year-old had a nice walking horse. He went through the war, no trouble. Price didn't lose no horse till he got to St. Louis. At St. Louis, he had his horse shot out from under him. So he asked this Dunlap boy, could he have his horse? So he took his horse and rode him to the end of the war.
Maybe you just talked about this the other night, because it still seems fresh.
But forwards in my family, I don't remember anybody having a horse shot out from under him.
Let's see. Then you talk. At this point, you start talking about Squire Phillips, Railroad Head in Sedalia, Flat Creek. From Windsor to Flat Creek was Prairie, and talked about.
Well, you're talking about Flat Creek. Now, when my grandfather got big enough to work, he left his uncle and went back with his mother east of Windsor. Now, Windsor had one store, and but they were still coal mining country. They were starting to build houses. So what he did, he hauled eggs and cream to Sedalia to the railhead, good market. And he took out across the prairie, and you never seen a tree till you got to Flat Creek. Windsor didn't have a tree in it when he was a boy, not a tree.
Huh.
And he took off the prairie, and that is his first job, was hauling cream and eggs and chicken to the railhead in Sedalia. And then while my grandmother, she was a good big girl, she was working in Windsor, and they was beginning to build up houses. They needed a railroad, so the Katy Railroad come through, and they brought black powder to shoot in the mines. So they unloaded at the depot, and there was a bunch of old men, like they always are, sitting around, you know. Black guys black powder come in little kegs. They rolled the kegs out on the platform that take to the mines, and one had a hole in it. And it had black powder running out on the platform. And they said, one of them said, watch them black guys run. So he lit a match. Well, they run all right. They run too, but the old men had to run too. And there's a terrible hole in the ground. It blowed the depot plumb away. That carload of black powder went off. And grandmother was a couple of 3 blocks away from there, broke all the dishes in the safe and the windows out of the house. She didn't know what the heck had happened. But it was a small town at that time.
Well, okay. Do you remember anything that happened on August 23rd, 1891? Somebody got married or something?
Well, you know, my grandmother and granddad was working at Llewellyn's. They had a niece, Mrs. Llewellyn had a niece up here. She was the same age as my grandmother, and the same age as Ms. Llewellyn. And the one that got married. And one hot day, my grandmother throwed some cold water on my granddad. So he run to the well and pumped out some, and he was going to drench my grandmother. Well, she's going to run in the house. Well, Miss Joe Smar, that's who she ended up being married. She shut the door and wouldn't let her in. Granddad really drenched her. And she said, told Ms. Smar, Ms. Smar told her, you're in love with Ben Bell. It'll be a cold day in August before I'll marry Ben Bell. So that's what it led up to. So it was a cold, they had to wear their overcoats. Then they got on the Katy track and went today, got their license, got married, and come back. And the next morning, they had their wagon loaded. They had a table, I think 4 or 5 chairs, and a schiffer robe and something else.
Is that a dresser? Same thing as a dresser?
Well, it's like a dresser. And they kept that schiffer robe. I don't know. Benny got it. I don't know what happened to it, but it's still around the knot. But anyway, the next morning they headed north, driving 2 horses and leading one. And they stopped on the north side of Knob-Noster. That is the south part of town at that time, under a big oak tree, and eat their dinner. It was beginning to warm up, so they got out of their overcoats. And then they headed on up here, and they got here by dark, over here where the county barn is. That is their honeymoon, I guess you'd say.
And where did they go from there then?
From
I
what?
mean, how far away? I mean, how far from the county shed were they?
Well, you went to the top of the hill and south a quarter of a mile. East of the shed, on top of the hill, then south a quarter of a mile. That's where the house was. But there's 80 acres where the barn is today, and then a 40 on the north side of the road. There's 120 acres what he had when he was there. When he left, shut it off. Oh, there you are. Am I still here?
Yep.
Well, you know, I grew up working mules all my life. And I was a little boy. I think I was about maybe 6 years old. And my folks liked mules out of coal camp area, said there's better mules than these up here. Them Germans had good Persian mares and they had dang good mules. And the last time I remember them getting mules was about 26 maybe, 25 or 6. And they went to neighbor where Odell Dar lived. Pogue was his name, Merritt Pogue. He bought them for his dad, Bill Pogue. And granddad, they had 16 head of mule colts, and they went down and drove them home. And they was going to leave early that morning to go to coal camp. Dad had a nice walking horse, a steel gray horse with a flight mane and tail. And Poggy, he borrowed his neighbor horse, which was a black walking horse. And they was going to leave early. Well, the sun come up and they hadn't come, so Dad finally called and talked to his wife, and he said, well, they overslept. He's milking a cow. As soon as he gets the cow milked, I'll be there. Well, when they got the cow milked, he did come, and they headed for coal camp. Well, they rode in at coal camp at 8 o'clock. And the old man said, I'd give you up. we had supper for you, but my wife will warm the food back up, and we'll go out and look at the mules, and you can pay me, and I'm gonna get you out here at daybreak in the morning. So that's what they did. They looked the mules over and decided it's all right, and they paid him. So the next morning, he got up and started out the mules. They harnessed the old man's horse. He was crippled. He couldn't ride but in a buggy. So he took a buggy up the road and said, I know where all the gates are, and I'll keep the mules from running in. So they started up the road. Dad took the lead, and the mules and Pokey followed up. After the old man got a little ways, he said, you're doing great. I'm going back home, and I'll let you all alone. So they took on up the road. Now a mule colt will follow a white horse to kingdom come without, I don't know why, but that's why they followed that horse with a white mane and tail. They got to my granddad Allen's at dark, so they lotted them there. Then the next morning, they started up here. Now they come right down Main Street in Noster with all them mules and on up here at home. Well, they got in late in the evening. I had a little kid out in the yard playing when they come in with all the mules. Part of them shot across the yard and it scared the hell out of me. So that was last. But after that, they trucked them and they started trucking the mules in. So, but anyway, but Dad kept the mules till to his death.
Well, and then he had you sell them for him.
Yeah, and I divided up my dad and granddad in 49. Dad bought 4 saw mules in the fall of 48, and anyway, he kept them mules till in the 70, sometime in the 70s. I sold 1 pair. He told me to do it. So I took them to Concordia and sold them, and sold a set of harness with them. Well, they were so the guy bought them at Odessa, and them mules was so homesick for the other 2 that they got sick and like to died on him. Well, 2 years later, Dad decided to sell the other 2. So he called me up one day and he said, I want you to come over here. And he said, I want you to share them mules and won't nobody else do it and take them to Concordia. So that's what I did. I sold the last pair. And I sold them, I think, about 75. Dad died at, 74. Dad died in 75.
Well, it says here that the first team you sold was 28 years old, and
Well, I don't know what the heck it was, but anyway, that's something more like that.
and the second team was 30 years old when you sold
Well,
them, which
something
would have
like
been 2 years later.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we need to go ahead and, during the last one, you talked about how a mule's smarter and what the, you were talking about how a mule was smarter than a horse and all the things that a mule that would do that are smarter than a horse. So just tell me about.
Well, you know, the mules, the jackass family, is supposed to be stubborn. They're not stubborn, they're just cautious. And mules, you can work them, they're not run off, they ain't gonna hurt themselves. A horse run against a wall or anything, kill themselves, but a mule ain't gonna get hurt. He's smart enough at that. And you know, mules stand the heat a lot better than the horses. And all I ever knew, we had young mules every year. At the time as 3-year-olds, we didn't have anybody, and we started over every spring with a new bunch of mules. And they made money at it. And so I stayed with that as long as I was with my granddad and dad. But after I left them, I didn't have but 1 pair of mules. And that was all I had. But a mule, you know, the Jones brothers out here at town, where Cassingham's store is, was a mule barn. They bought mules, sold mules, and I never went to town with Dad, but what he did go with a barn. And you go in there, have a lot of mules, and they was gonna go south with the mules. They'd have them on a plank floor, putting shoes on the front wheel, front feet, make them stand up and look good. And they wet the floor down. Well, a mule come on that wet floor, he wouldn't even switch his tail. You could pick up his feet and shoe him and no problem at all. You left him on the dirt, you might have to horse with him. So, that's one smart thing about a mule. He wasn't gonna get hurt.
I think you talked about
And
how they
one thing-
back into a field,
Huh?
how they would back into a cornfield.
Yeah, we had a neighbor, I remember this, my life, East Oak Grove Church, Bill Greer, he bought mules all the time. And as soon as you got on cultivating corn, he started buying mules. He wanted them harness marks on there. And he always put out 8 acres of corn and checked it. And anyway, them mules, he'd turn them in it when they got roasting there. They'd start eating that corn. Well, them mules wasn't gonna be out in that cornfield, might be a booger out there. So they'd back in the row and then start eating. And they eat that, I remember them, I was a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, and I remember them eating that corn down to a stub. Backing in there eating that field. They finally eat the whole field up, but, and they'd get fat and slick on that green corn. And then the old man would ship them south to the market.
But they don't founder like a horse.
No, they won't founder. Now, the miniature mules will founder. They get that from a pony. But big mules will never founder. The only thing you can founder a big mule is water. You can water founder him, not let him have enough water and then let him drink too much. But they won't founder. You feed them. We fed mules we had a big trough on the one side of the barn, 2 or 3 doors along the side. We scooped corn and oats in there about once a week. We filled that full. And all we'd done when we got on working, we'd turn them loose and put them in there, and they had hay from the ground up, and they eat that corn as they wanted it, and oats, and you didn't worry about them founder. And but a horse would founder. You just would eat, kept eating.
Well, let me kind of get some perspective here. I don't know what the timeline is, so tell me, I know that there was some talk about possibly being drafted at one time.
About what?
Being drafted. And I don't know if that was before you were married or after you were married.
Before I got married, I didn't date very many girls. Didn't have no money to run around. So I went to pie supper over at Bowman School, where I went to grade school. Is that thing going all right?